Laurie Allen. Laurie Allen is a certified financial planner and founder of Wealth Management. Since 2008, she has cultivated in-depth knowledge across multiple areas of financial planning. Don't get scared, ladies. She is amazing. Laurie's desire is to support professional women and their families, guiding them to take action for their wealth. Laurie lives in Southern California with her husband Mike and children Lily and Teddy. And Teddy is my son's best friend. And here is an in, ladies. Laurie is expecting baby number 3. So would you please welcome Laurie Allen.
Thank you. Normally, when I find myself on a stage, I am not talking about myself. You'll find me talking about entrepreneurship and women in finance, maybe investments or money. So this is a little bit of a stretch for me, so much so that I reached out to Thais and I said, there's no chance I can take up 20 minutes. I can't. I've tried, but even if nothing I say today means to anyone else, it's a very important exercise for me. I sat with God and I sat with my feelings, and then I kept timing it, and it was more than 15 minutes. So I'm going to push really hard to get through what I told her that I would. Today, to talk to you guys about my walk with God, I have decided that I want to take you through my own personal adoption. And if you want, you can turn on the first slide. On a unknown day, it shocks some people to know that I don't know my actual date of birth. In November of 1982, I was born in a very small village that I don't know exactly where it is. I haven't been there, near the North and South Korea border. My birth mom, she brought me into a city to see a doctor, and she checked into a hotel and told the innkeeper, I need to go get some medicine, and left, and she never returned. That innkeeper eventually took me to a police station somewhere in the city, and from the police station, I was brought to an orphanage in Seoul, which is guys, I'm pregnant. I'm a little more emotional than I normally am. I'm not usually a crier. But anyways, I was brought to an orphanage. There, I was named by the director of the orphanage, Yoon Mi-jung. And about 5 months later, I found myself on a plane, crossing the Pacific Ocean to meet my family. Sorry. This is my family. I would become the youngest of 4. My, as you can tell, they're very fair-skinned and very tall people, actually. So, but it was okay. In my home, I was loved, I was encouraged, and I was taught to love Jesus. And I know that some different adopted children have different experiences, but for me, I might as well have been 6 feet tall. Like, I just didn't feel that different. I'm barely 5 feet tall, but if you put me in a room full of tall people, I don't feel that weird. But I'm here to share the actual journey of adoption, and it's not always the Instagram beautiful version, because adoption, like life, because adoptions are full of families and they are real life, sometimes it can be messy. So our house growing up, even though, that is a good-looking family right there, it was very unstable. My dad, he was born in the 40s, and we didn't know what the spectrum was in the 40s, but he definitely was on the spectrum, and it created a lot of instability. You wonder why I do, financial services as a living? It's literally as a direct result how we grew up with tons and tons of financial mismanagement. And my mom, I actually have no memories of her not being in a wheelchair. She struggled for many, many years with multiple sclerosis. And by the time I turned 12, she passed away, actually from ovarian cancer. It was during that time that my dad started really, really struggling with his depression. And being the youngest of four, my siblings, they moved on. They moved out of the home and continued their adult lives. I internalized all of that. When you're 12, when you're pregnant, you've got lots of emotions, especially as a 12-year-old girl. So during that time, I just felt abandoned by God, abandoned by the world, and my faith withered on the vine. Thank you. I spent the next 15 years of my life not concerned with God. I had a God-shaped hole in my heart, but I tried to fill it with friends and boyfriends, personal accomplishments, anything that I could to fill that hole, that big, big hole, God-shaped hole in my heart. It was during that time that I met and married my husband, and we had the first blessing of my life, my daughter, who's 12. Oh. It was when I became a parent and I had her, I have this very distinct, I'll never forget these moments, where I began to think about my mom and wishing that she was here, but for the first time in my life, I thought about my birth mom. I loved my daughter so much that I couldn't imagine having to be faced with in a position like that. And so for the first time in 15 years, I prayed for her, that she was okay. And I felt that these walls that I had built up around my own heart begin to crumble. That 15 years is a long time to go without praying. Sorry. Anyways, it was during that time that I looked at my daughter and I said, she's not going to grow up the way that I did. She's going to know the love of Jesus. And I brought myself alone because my husband at the time was not a Christian. And we went to church by ourselves for a couple years. It was hard. There was a lot of conflict in our home because of it. But God did a work in me, and through that, he did a work in my husband. And today we go to church together. It was during that time that he was working in both of our lives. Rachel asked me earlier, why such a big gap? It was because God had to prepare us, and he had to prepare our family. I started to feel a very intense calling to adopt, to grow our family through adoption. And so you would think like, oh, well, you're adopted. You probably know a lot about adoption, but you just don't. And actually, you can go to the next slide. All right. So we went on this journey to figure out how do you do this thing called adoption. And my mind was blown. I had no idea. We learned through this process that here in the United States alone, there are 400,000 kids who have no home. California, there's 60,000, and specifically in LA County, there's a really, really big concentration. There's 30,000. That's not Orange County, that's not Riverside or anything else. We also learned that black boys are very unlikely to be adopted, and that it was going to be a little bit of a process. It wasn't going to be easy. There were lots of people in our lives who tried to dissuade us from this path. We heard things like, I don't think you're equipped to raise a black boy. What if their family's from Compton and they try to kill you? All kinds of crazy things. Everything from, we'll give you the money if that's the problem. It was kind of a discouraging process, but we persisted. And in 2016, we got a call for our son, who's right there. He is the cutest in the world. And for those of you who know, some of you in the room know my son. He is loving, he's very bright, he's athletically gifted like my husband and I are not. And he has the energy of like 100 puppies trapped into a 7-year-old boy's body. But just like, and I'm here to share, like, adoption is real. It's not, I put this picture up on Instagram, everyone's like, oh my gosh, he's the cutest. Maybe I'm going to adopt. But it's difficult, and you would think there are days where I'm like, or how about this? I thought falsely that I would be an amazing adoptive parent because I'm adopted. But there are things that you just don't know are going to happen. Many of you are mothers, and the conversations that we've had to have in our home about with a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, 6-year-old, about drugs, homelessness, racism, all kinds of things that just break my heart that these conversations are happening in my home. There are tears, there's insecurities from me even. But I'm going to tell you one thing. This child and this process, much more than my own adoption, has helped me to get to the place where I for the first time in my life, understand God's love for me. Ephesians 1:5 says, God decided in advance to adopt us into his own family by bringing us to himself through Jesus Christ. This is what he wanted to do, and it gave him great delight. I started to realize that our salvation is adoption. We don't get birthright from God. We are separated from him by our own sin, but he loves us in spite of that. And so the more that I understand both sides of that adoptive story, the more I began to be able to receive God's love for me. And it's really changed me. If that's the only takeaway, is that we are all adopted. And that it's really a beautiful thing. So with that, I just wanted to share one other thing, because adoption is important to me. If you can't tell, it's something that I spend time on, where we give our money and we give our time. And so as a church family, right, God does call us to be the father to the fatherless. And that doesn't mean that every person in this room is going to run out and say, like, okay, we're going to adopt tomorrow. I'm realistic. I know that that's not going to happen. But there are a lot of ways, and we are living kind of in this epicenter of children who need homes. But you don't really see it every day. Many of us live here in the South Bay. It's very comfortable. So on the last slide, just wanted to share 5 ways that we can be plugged in the adoption community, in the foster care community, and not every single one of us have to adopt. But the first is through community engagement. I don't think that it breaks my heart when people come up to me and say, I would love to adopt, but there's no way that I can afford it. And I want to scream and say, it's free. They pay you to do this. And so each year through my business, we update a document that gives parents information on the finances behind adoption. How can we do it? Where can we get grants? What agencies will pay you? What agencies will help you with childcare? All kinds of things. And we can share that information, and that's how people understand. The second is volunteering our time. I put a link here at the bottom. This organization is called Foster the City. They work with churches to support families who are going through foster adoption. It is a grueling process, and it's very difficult to get through it alone. So, we can do things like give rides, bring meals. There are ways to, there are children living in foster care that need help with things like applying to college, getting a driver's license, all kinds of things that maybe their foster parents don't have the ability or expertise to help them with. There's always your financial support. Matthew 6:21 says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, right? I think that one's pretty obvious. And then the last 2 obviously there's ways to become what's called a foster parent. And a foster parent may be feeling a need for a short period of time. There may be children who can return home, but they need a loving, Christ-centered home for a time while their parents are able to get themselves together. That, I think, is maybe the highest calling. I don't know that I don't want to say it because then God's going to do that. But anyways, and then the last is adoption. So I'm just going to say this. I know that there are a lot of this big room. There's lots of big hearts and questions. But if you feel an inkling in your heart that maybe this is a way that you might want to grow your own family, pray and educate yourself. On the last slide is just my personal information. I want to share with people. I am more than happy to answer questions. I am a financial planner, so if people are worried about the dollars and the cents of it, this is something that I help people with. And so feel free to use it. And sorry for the tears. But thank you.
Thank you, Laurie.